Okay, everyone, so in the next lesson, let's try to talk about the for loop. So in the previous lesson, we did talk about the while loop and the do while. We also learned about the continue and the break statement. So perhaps later we can also try to look up some more examples on when to use the break statement here and the continue statement. But for now, let's try to talk about the for loop, which is one of those complex loops that you might encounter in PHP. This is going to be behaving like their C counterparts if you have some background with the C language. And the syntax for this will be you having an expression 1, expression 2, and an expression 3. So that's the very basic syntax for a for loop. So we will be using 3 expressions, and then we would want to have a code block here. So inside of our for loop, we do have an expression 1, an expression 2, and an expression 3. And expression 1 is going to be evaluated once. And this is when we conduct the initialization. So let me just go get this and put that here. So we're going to be initializing a variable. That means we declare a variable and then we assign it a value. Then the expression 2, this is going to be evaluated before each of the iteration. And this is where the condition, and this is going to be a condition that is going to be true. The loop will then be continuing, and otherwise, if it is false, it will be terminating the loop. Then here in the expression 3, let's put a condition here. For the expression 3, this is the part from where we are executing each iteration of the loop. So that means the expression 3 is evaluated after each iteration. This can be a way for us to update the counter variable that we have declared in expression 1. So that means we can increase or decrease the value during iteration. So we can either increment or decrement our expression 3 here. So let's just put that, or let's just say expression 3 would either be, or better, we use the words. So that's our template here. We initialized a variable, so let's try to go do that. I'm going to initialize a variable I, or let's say iteration. Shorthand for that will be I. Then assign it a value of 0, and that statement or that expression. So we will be setting the first expression here, and it will be evaluated once, and then it will be setting the counter to 0. So the current value of I is currently 0. Then the second expression is going to be our condition. So this is going to be evaluated before each of the iteration. So let's say I would want to have here $i is less than or equal to 10, and that expression. So the code block here will only be executed if this expression is going to be set to true. So if this condition is true, we execute the code block. And the last part here, so in this case, we do have here the expression is checking on whether it is less than or equal to 10. For the third expression, we will be having here a way to increment the value of I. And most commonly, you would see I as the common variable that is being used for a for loop, just for short for iteration. And right now, we can put a code block here that echoes the number, the current counter is $i. And let's have a line break here. Let's end that. And I think, well, did we make a mistake here? The current counter is, where are we getting that mistake? We are expecting, I think We added a semicolon at the end there. That was causing the issue. And now, if I try to refresh this, we should see the current counter is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it stopped when we reached that value of 10. Okay, so let's just start to look at the statement that we have created here. So we did the initialization, we assigned the value of 0 to I. Currently, in the condition, we have the I with the value of 0 is less than or equal to 10. We're specifying the loop should continue as long as I is less than or equal to 10. And in here, we are incrementing the counter variable, and that's here, that's the counter variable, by 1 after each times the code block is going to be executed. And then it ends once it has reached the condition that we have set in our second expression. And that's why we are getting that value. The current counter is up to 10, 0 to 10. For loop is a very useful looping technique in any programming languages. It can be used for various purposes. Let's say we want to declare here an array. We haven't yet covered arrays, so this is another thing that we should be aware of when you're learning a new programming language. Just keep in mind that an array is like a variable, but instead of just storing one value into that variable, we are storing a number of data types or a number of values. And we use the square brackets for us to be able to declare that this is going to be an array of string literal data types. So this is what we call the array invocation operator. And right now, unlike with the variable declaration from where we are only using a single data type, we can store multiple data or information or elements of the array inside of one variable that we have initialized with the value of an array. So now what we can do here is to try to go and iterate each of those elements through and echo it out on the browser. The way we can try to do that will be, rather than having to write down echo red, echo green, echo blue, we can just use a for loop for us to initialize a variable. Let's iterate a variable, assign it with a value of 0. We'll set a condition from where we want to use a method. As you can see, I type count, and there's this mixed array or countable int mode that the Visual Studio Code is telling us. And there's a function, built-in function in the PHP language that is called count. And what we want to do here is to count through, and we'll be using the function invocation operator. So we haven't yet covered functions yet, but we'll be covering this in future lessons. And right now, I'm just going to use this built-in method. Again, functions can be sometimes called as methods, and the main distinguishment, methods is a term that we usually use if it's going to be something that the language is using as a built-in function. But if we are going to be creating a customized function, we can name that whatever we want. We can just call it, or we usually call it, a function that we have created. So those are just some common things that you might see if you try to do a quick Google search about the difference of the term function and methods. So the idea there will be, if I say methods, I'm referring to built-in functions in the language. Okay, just don't get confused. And usually this is one of the things that you would normally want to identify if you are reading code base. Is this a built-in in the language that you're learning, specifically in the PHP language, or is this a custom identifier name for a function that we have created as a programmer? If you're not yet getting what I mean by functions, we'll go through them. I just wanted to explain that concept of methods and functions, and this is a very important concept in any programming language. Understanding what functions are is definitely going to be a big part in your development careers. So at least now you will be oriented that there is a term called functions and methods, and it can either be built into the language, or it can be a custom functions that you've created as a programmer. And in here, I want to pass in this value of color here, because this count function is going to be used for us to be able to return the number of elements in an array, and we have 0, 1, 2. Just take note, in programming we usually start with 0, when we are counting, especially if you hear the term index based. So index based, we start from index 0, 1, and 2. So if I go and now we have created the condition, we want to increment I by 1. And let's create here. So I can see that we do have a count variable or a count method. We are checking here and we are incrementing it. Now we want to echo colors, and again, if you're not yet getting what we're seeing here, we will talk more about how we can access arrays in future lessons, but for now, just follow along and I'm sure you'll be able to see how this is going to be working as we try to work on this example. So we do have here 4 iterated by initialized with 0. We have that we're getting this red expecting a semicolon. To have the semicolon. Do we need that? No, we don't need that. I think it just didn't propagate. So now, if we try to refresh this, we do see red, green, and blue getting iterated and displayed on the browser. When we try to go and have this value less than the current number of arrays using the count method. So just one thing, if we try to read through this, again, we are iterating through each of the elements and we're adding a space in between. That's why we use this concatenation operator. And I think we should use colors rather than color. And just to show you here what would happen if we only use the array member accessory operator. So we do have the square brackets. We're accessing the different elements of an array by using those square brackets also here in front of the variable colors that contains the elements of the array. And let's see what are we going to get. Where did I make a mistake here? So colors. And I think that's because we also need to have that colors. So it's really important that you read through the error that you're seeing. You'll see I saw that this is count and it's giving me an idea where is the error that I'm encountering here, uncaught type error. So that means I saw that we were missing that letter S because we changed the variable name identifier. And now we can see because we don't have that concatenation operator that's adding a space in each of the iteration, we can see that the string literals or the name of the colors are beside each other and it's not adding that extra space in each of the iteration. And again, let me just say that just to show a proof of concept. You'll see we now have that extra space in between those elements of the array. So I hope you got the idea of how for loops can work and what are the expressions that we include in this for statement for us to be able to run the code block inside of the for loop. So that's it for this lesson. Thank you and see you on our next lesson.